So first thing is to wish you a happy day if you're Irish, and go to slide one. You don't need to write this down because it's going to be on the website, but I've basically taken an article and knocked it down to this presentation, added a few bits and pieces, but we're going to put this entire article onto our next monthly newsletter. And I'll also give you a reference to it. Well, you'll see it in this presentation when it goes onto the website. Um, Now, during the pandemic, I learned how to do animations. So you get to watch all of this. Okay, the good news. First is that the malware that is being applied to Macintoshes is actually decreasing. For some reason, the malware people are concentrating more on PCs. So we're not getting as many of them on Macs as we used to get. Second thing is that the Macintosh is at the moment based on a Unix operating system, and Unix systems are much harder to crack into. So people who want to break into computers are going to find it much easier to do it with PCs. The third thing is the hardware. Apple products have in the past made their own hardware to run the programs on. A few years ago, they started it with using the A chips on iPhones and iPads and other iDevices. And now more recently, they've decided to do the same thing with Macintoshes. So you're going to see more and more Macintoshes coming up with the M1 chip. One of the reasons for the M1 chip is in there are certain routines built into the hardware, which tends to help get rid of bad guys. So there's a hardware option, which again is not there on PCs. And it's one of the reasons why Apple decided to switch to a different CPU because the ones that we were using are more vulnerable. In the hardware, there's actually two things. Recently, since like 2018, many Macs have what's called a T2 chip in there. And that special T2 chip was put there to help get rid of bad guys. And now, as I just said, the M1 chips are using the same technology, which is in iPhones and iPads. And that should help keep Macintoshes less vulnerable to bad guys. Now, there's antivirus capability built into the operating system. These days, we've got a product which is called XProtect, and whether you knew it was there or not, it is running in the current versions of the Macintosh operating system. In the past, there was also something called Gatekeeper, which came up about 6 operating systems ago. Gatekeeper's primary purpose is to stop you from downloading applications which are dubious or doubtful. You've probably been used to the fact that you're not allowed to download software unless it either comes from the Apple Store, where hopefully they've tested it and found that there's nothing bad in it, but also it allows you to do software from recognized developers. Now, once in a while, we do come across a piece of software which Magic thinks are good for you. One of them, for example, is called Onyx, and it helps keep your Mac cleaned out. For some reason, it's not recognized by Apple as being a good guy developer, but we know that it is. So there are ways to get around Gatekeeper. We've shown you how to do that when you need to. And there is some advice on how to do that in our website. But generally do not download applications unless they've come from Apple or someone in Magic has told you, yeah, it's okay to use this one. So if ever you have a question about that, call Harry. Oh yeah, we had a cute graphic, so I had to put this on here too. Lock up everything. Now, there's also external antivirus capabilities. and you probably know many of them. There are some, actually there's quite a few out there. Some are well known. One is called Bitdefender. The big advantage to Bitdefender is that for those of us who are not wizards, you can just put it onto your computer and forget that it's there. It's a put it on and forget it, and it'll protect you very well. It's not geeky at all. Another one is called Sophos. I know a number of you use Sophos. It works, it's a good one. And these two are relatively cost effective. I use Clamex AV. It's not quite as sophisticated, but it does everything that I need. And I generally am looking for the more geeky problems. My behavior is such that I'm unlikely to get attacked because I know how to defend my Macintosh. So Clamex does for me. And another one is called Kaspersky. That's also well known and is cost effective. So anytime you go looking for advice on antiviral software, you probably find these four included in the list. There are others that I'm not so excited about. Stick with these four unless you know what you're doing or someone's giving you some really good advice. Now, to protect yourself, it's probably a good idea to go into your system preferences and do some things which will help with your security and privacy. When you go into the system preferences, one of the icons is for security and privacy. And when you click on it, it looks like this. So I want to point out a couple of things on here. First, let's start with the general up at the top there. This is the general page, and on here there are several things you need to do. One of them is require a password. For goodness sake, make sure this one is turned on, and then you can set it to be immediately after the screen is either gone to sleep or the screensaver has begun. That way you can walk away from your computer and nobody will mess with it. Now you can change immediately to for 5 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. But for most of us, I think it should be immediately. It makes your computer safe if it gets stolen, like you're in a coffee shop or somebody comes into your house or office and takes it. In the lower section, you'll see that this is Gatekeeper that I mentioned earlier, that you can decide what you want to be able to download. Some people set the upper option as being Apple Store and only get your software from Apple Store. If you're not a guru of any kind, you may want to go with that recommendation. But the lower one is pretty safe too. So you can go to App Store and identify developers. These are developers that Apple have decided are good guys. Now, most of the problems are going to occur, for most of us at least, while we're surfing. It's while we're out there on the internet. And on the internet, there are people who give us all kinds of wonderful information. There are people who give us all kinds of useless information, but there are also bad guys who will try and get us to download things that we really don't want to have on our computer. First advice on this is avoid anything that's got Flash. These days, Flash is actually going away anyway. It was a system developed by Adobe. And Flash is designed to be able to show you movies, but also interactive elements so that you can play games with it and other information. Now, it's going away anyway, but I would turn it off or take it off your computer, and we'll later show you how and why. But take it off your computer and only put it on there if there's something you really want to watch, because there are still occasionally some news channels which show you movies using Flash. But most of the reliable news channels have now stopped using Flash, and we should all be happy that that's true, because Flash can have hidden bad things in it. Another thing is to turn off JavaScript unless you need it. This is in your Safari or whatever system that you're using to cruise around the internet. Most of them have in there a JavaScript capability. It's possible that JavaScript can be used to do evil to your computer, but it's very rare. And quite a few websites do in fact have JavaScript within them. This includes the website for Magic. I only use it in a few places. One of them is the feedback loop. If you go into the page which allows you to do feedback to us, I use JavaScript to set up the form that you fill out. And the same for the one where you apply to become a member. So you may have to turn on JavaScript momentarily while you use that stuff. Otherwise, if you're in doubt, turn it off unless you really know what you're doing.
Robert, Laura has asked, is Flash strictly from Adobe, or are there other Flash products?
No, Flash was developed by Adobe, and Flash Player is an Adobe product, and it's Flash. That's what you need to turn off or get off your computer. You can always put it back on temporarily if you need it for something, but I recommend completely removing it from the computer. And the third point on this slide was that in Safari, especially the later editions, there is no tracking on there. In fact, they often give you a report telling you how many sites that you've been to attempt to track you, but they're stopping it from doing it. Tracking is used by various places to find out what your behavior is, find out what you're interested in, so they can set up marketing strategies. And generally, I hate this. They all do it. All the big shopping enterprises. I find it annoying when I go to Amazon and I look for a children's book for one of my, nieces or something. And then for the next 3 weeks, they're recommending to me all kinds of children's books. And that, I don't have any children. Since it's surfing, I put a sailboat down there at the bottom. And the other day it was Women's Day, so I made it pink. Okay, Protect Your Mac has Apple goodies. I mentioned earlier that the M1 chip is in there, and one of its capabilities is to knock some of these guys out. In computers since 2018, they're the T1 and T2 chips, which are doing the same thing. And most of you, or many of you, will have it, but probably never knew that you had it. Something else is Find My Mac. I suggest you turn this on. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the one good thing about having clouds, iCloud in particular, is that your Mac can be found with this Find My Mac application. That's not an application, but it's in your computer, and I suggest you turn it on. And in a little while, I'm going to show you how you turn that guy on. There's also nowadays fingerprint scanners on various devices. Some of the newer Macs have it, and also iPhones and iPads have it. So that, again, the thing becomes attached to you, and without your fingerprint, you can't get into it. In fact, these days, there's also face print on there too. Now, in the security settings, one of the things you need to have is a really good password. Now, we've talked about passwords in the past. Again, you don't need to go to this website right now, but it will be available to you. You can see that this website is on the Magic Mug website, and it's in the tricks and tips section, and it's called passwords.html. Just go in there and look for the word passwords. And we've got a whole article about how to set passwords, how to generate passwords, how to manage passwords. Here's a look at the top part of that page on the website, and you can see in the contents that after the introduction, there is a whole chapter about what an effective password is. How do you store passwords? And we talk about some of the software which is out there to store passwords so that you don't have to remember all of them. You, of course, need to have a different password for everything that requires a password. So in my case, I'm probably using about 50 passwords because there are different shopping centers I go to on the web, not just Amazon, but other places too. And also various applications require you to have softwares to prove that you bought the darn thing. So we talked to you about generating passwords, transferring them, and so forth. Go read this page. It's there for your amusement. In storing passwords, you've actually got 3 ways of doing it. Built into the Macintosh is a keychain. If you go into your applications and then look inside the folder called utilities, one of the things in there is something called keychain. And keychain is where you store or can store all your passwords. Your operating system will use it every time it comes up with a little window that says, do you want to save this password? So, you set up and put passwords in from time to time. The system is actually asking you, do you want to store these so you don't have to remember them and you don't have to use them next time you go to certain places. So, and again, keychain is described in more detail in the article I just mentioned, the one in the background here. Then there are 2 other applications that I'll particularly recommend, but you have to go get them. They're cost effective, they're not that expensive. But the one that I use is called PWSafe. PWSafe is available for Macintoshes, but it's also available for iPhones and iPads and so forth. And if you set up a set of passwords on the Mac, you can transfer them quickly over to the iPhone and use the same ones so that wherever you are, you can get access to all of the passwords that you need to have access to. The third one on here is called 1Password. It also is available to all your devices. It's slightly more expensive, but I know that some members are already using it. And it works well. I've tried it out once and we like it, so we can recommend that one as well if you prefer it. But PWSafe is the one I use, and you can find it on the App Store. You can also go search for it with your search engine and download it. Now, in security settings, something that we teach people to do and used to do when we had Mac classes, maybe one day we'll get back to Mac classes again, but we suggest that you set up a new user, a second user other than yourself, and set it up as being non-administrator and use that one for all your stuff. So you've got one administrator, which doesn't have anything much in it, but put all your stuff into this non-administrator one. That way you protect yourself from your own stupidity. We see this from time to time, even amongst our members, someone doing something silly and it turns out to erase stuff or do things that only an administrator can do. So if you have an account which does not have administrator permissions, you're less likely to do something silly to yourself. And that's less effort for Ron or myself or whoever to clean up afterwards. And here's where we do it. Again, you go into the system preferences. Only this time you click on the icon that's called Users and Groups. And you can see here that you can make new systems or you can also get rid of old users. Down at the bottom here, you'll see there's a plus, which allows you to make new ones. And there's a minus, which allows you to get rid of whichever one you've just set up. Notice down in here that when you set up a new one or you've got an existing one, like here, I've got one with a cute cat in it. You can allow it to administer this computer, but you can turn it off. So my comments earlier about making a system, making a user which does not have Unix sorry, does not have administer capability, this is the way you do it. Oh, and there I am pointing it out. Something else you can do too, and you can see I've done it up in here. I've produced a wizard a system which does have administrator privileges. That's the one I go to if I have problems with my normal user. So this one could be a way to get into the computer when for some reason it won't allow me to get into my normal user. This is extraordinarily rare and you're unlikely to come across such problems. I don't remember seeing one for decades, but as a habit, I still put one in here. Now I can land airplanes too. What do you think, Harry? Don't answer that. I see you're muted.
That's really impressive.
So I mentioned earlier, Find My Mac. I think I have a slide. Yes. When you, again, this is system preferences. And up at the top now, we've clicked on something called Apple ID. And you see in here that there's, when you go to iCloud on the left-hand side, you can turn on and turn off all the things that you can do with iCloud. Now, I personally don't like putting things on clouds. No cloud is safe, 100% safe. There are ways to break into clouds, and I don't care whose cloud it is. In this case, it's the Apple's cloud called iCloud. But one of the things I do turn on is Find My Mac, because when that is turned on and you lose your Mac, maybe in a coffee shop, maybe when you're out driving around and you left it someplace, you can pick up your iPhone and ask it to find your Mac, and it will tell you where it is. Hopefully you just left it somewhere so you can go and pick it back up. But if somebody's stolen it, it can locate it. It uses the capability of your Mac to tell Apple where the heck it is, assuming you got the location services on, and this location service is on. So, so I recommend that you do this for your own safety. Now, if your Mac is at home and you've chained it to the desk and you've chained the building to the property, you maybe don't need this, but for most of us, it's probably a good idea to use this. And then it's up to you whether you use other iCloud stuff. We've had meetings in the past where we've discussed how safe they are and whether you should use clouds or not. There's a lot of advantages to using clouds, but you have to know that there are risks. They are not risk-free. Then also for your security, this is simple advice, but not everybody follows it all the time. I thoroughly recommend to you that you keep your system up to date. Also, you go to the newest system that your Macintosh can get to. And part of the reason is that they are updating things inside the operating system, which help you to defeat malware. Apple are keeping an eye on who the bad guys are, as well as everybody else, and they modify the software, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but they modify their operating system to protect you against these attacks, which nasty people will do. So you keep your system up to date, and you also keep your software up to date, and by software here, I mean all your applications. So you're best off, unless there's a good reason not to stay up to date with things like Pages and your email and your browser and everything else for more or less the same reasons. Part of it is to protect you against bad guys, but also part of it is just to keep you up to date with all the developments that Apple are putting into the software as well as the operating system. Every once in a while, they do a bad one, and in Magic, we will warn you about it and say, maybe you don't want to upgrade this. We had about a decade ago some problems with Pages where they went and rewrote it, but in the process dropped a lot of capabilities that many of us loved. And so we wrote rude letters to Apple on that occasion. But keep your eye on our newsletters. Ron and I both spend time trying to keep up to date with what's good and what's not so good. Ron spends a lot of time looking out there on the web and looking at the various sites which discuss Macintosh problems and questions, and tries to keep us all up to date with what's good and what's bad. So read and memorize all of the newsletters.
Robert, there's a couple of comments here from Sandy. Do you recommend the password manager called LastPass?
Don't know it, haven't used it.
Okay.
If you've got it and it's working, I guess you're okay. If you haven't got it yet, then might I recommend PW Safe, because I know that one, I know it well, and I can help you through it if you got any questions.
And then Laura is saying, I save some passwords in an encrypted Word doc. What do you think?
If the document is encrypted, it's better than nothing. It depends on how well you've organized it. Some of these password applications are good at keeping them in orders, making them searchable, so it's easy to find the stuff rather than having a list of stuff and you got to go all the way through it, especially if you get 50 or more passwords to keep track of. So yeah, you're all on your own. For goodness sake, do keep your passwords someplace. Writing them on a sticky and putting it on the screen doesn't work for me. If you're going to put it into Pages, then yeah, secure it. And apparently she is securing it. So as long as she remembers that password. The same is true with all these pieces of software. They have a master password that you must not forget. And you make that one really long. In my case, it's a whole sentence. It's a gobbledygook sentence, but one that I remember because it has some significance to me, but nobody else will ever guess it. And it's at least 30 characters long. So it's a safe one that nobody will ever get. Yeah, here we are again in system preferences. And if you click on the software update icon, this is what you'll get. And it'll let you know if you've got the latest one. And you notice at the bottom there, if you want to, you can click on automatically keep my Mac up to date. I don't, because I do various experiments on my Mac that sometimes get down into the guts of it. So I want to know when I'm updating the software so I don't screw some of my experiments up. But for most people, you may want to just go in here and click on the automatically keep my Mac up to date. So you can just forget about it and go back to doing whatever it is you normally do in your Mac. I don't know how many of you are writing the Great American Novel or doing other practical things, but this is one way of keeping yourself as up to date as you can. Also, you can go to the App Store and it'll try and remind you if you need to do something like this. But whenever you need to do an update, you'll notice that on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a whole bunch of things. They always start you off in Discover because they want you to buy new software. And then there's Arcade and Create and Work. But the bottom item, which is the one I think that you default to, is Updates. Go down there and click on Updates and then take a look at the updates that it's recommending to you. On this page, I've just done some updates. So it's telling me these are the recent updates that I did. And apparently I just did Speed Test by Ookla today. But there are other ones in here like Pixelmator and iMovie, which I have recently updated. And it's just reminding me that this is what I've done in the last 30 days or whatever it is. So go to the App Store every once in a while and just check on this, on the updates, to make sure that you are up to date, especially on things like Pages and Numbers. But also it keeps track of everything that's on your computer and tells you which ones are out of date. Oh, there's the arrow. Now, in security, the Macs are much more secure than any other systems out there, but you can never be completely sure that an unsecured network is safe. So when you're out and about, your advice is to only connect to a secured hotspot, one that requires a password. So in some coffee shops, be careful with this. It's easier to join an unsecured network, but it's also easier for someone else to hack into it. So if you're in a coffee shop where there are criminals hang out, they might try and get into your computer. So be careful there. And be careful about what you download. There are a number of websites in particular, but also emails, which try to get you to download stuff which is evil. Just go click on the dot. We'll take care of all the problems in the world. And you can reduce the number of problems, again, by going to the security and privacy page and make sure that first, you disable automatic login. Never leave a computer around that's got automatic login. Automatic login allows you to just open up your computer and it logs into your account without needing any password or anything. That is totally vulnerable. Don't do it. Go here and click on this guy. Make sure that you have disabled the automatic login. You notice below that there's something where you can use your Apple Watch to unlock your Mac. Wow, who thought that up? It's really clever technical stuff, but we really don't need it. And that's the day when you're not wearing your Apple Watch too. So I can't see any good reason to turn it on unless you like playing with toys. And we've already mentioned this. I'm happy with the Apple Store and identified developers. You stick with that, you're less likely to get a hold of applications which are not good for you. Now, while you're in here, take a look at the Advanced button. If you click on the Advanced button, one of the things you get here is log out after so much inactivity. So if you're at home, you might want to just set this at 30 minutes. But in case you get called away from the house or you find yourself engaged in something that took longer than you thought, I would set it up to where it does log you out after a period of time. If you're in an office environment or there's other people around, I would set this to much lower, maybe 5 minutes. So that if you walk away for a little while, go to the bathroom, whatever it is you do, make it log you off so other people can't mess with your computer. And the second item is require an administrative password to access system-wide preferences. So only an administrator should be able to mess around with preferences which are system-wide. And many of the preferences that are in your system preferences do in fact affect system-wide stuff. So only an administrator should go mess with those. Now, looking again at security and privacy, a moment ago we looked at general. Now I'm going to move over here to the next item on the right, up in the top there, and we'll talk about File Vault. File Vault is a system that encrypts everything that's on your computer. The first time you encrypt it, it takes a little while, depending on how much stuff is on your hard drive. But then after that, it's hardly noticed. As you go download a file, it'll have to decrypt it, but it's got an algorithm that does it very quickly. And the same going back the other way. When you finish with the file, a Pages file or whatever, it'll re-encrypt it back up again. And if you have everything encrypted, then it means that nobody else can read what's on your hard drive. Even if they take it out and plug it into another computer, it's encrypted to the point that nobody can read it. So in certain circumstances, especially in portable computers and computers which are thievable, in fact, in any computer, unless you really, really need maximum performance out of your Mac, I would turn this guy on. In fact, on my computer, it is turned on. And you see over on the right-hand side, there is a turn on File Vault. I turned it off just for this picture so that you guys can see what it is you have to click on.
Robert, there's been few questions about Wi-Fi in hotels.
Wi-Fi's in hotels are suspect by definition. What's the question?
Is the Wi-Fi safe to use in hotels?
They're always suspect, and it depends on the hotel. If it's password protected, you're probably okay. But you might want to also talk to the people who run the hotel. In the better known hotels like Marriott, they make an effort to make sure it is protected. But in some of these cheap fly-by-night hotels called, you know, the milk bottle or whatever, you're on your own. Yeah, Holiday Inn and Marriott and well-known ones, it's in their best interest to protect you, and it's worth the extra few bucks to make sure that they've got as solid a connection as they can give you. Yeah, just be careful what you do there anyway. If I'm in a hotel, I might look quickly to see my emails, and I might cruise around to see what's on the news, but I'm unlikely to do anything that involves private information. Just be careful what you do, and that's true of coffee shops as well. Be careful what you do out there, and don't do anything personal. No, no banking from remote locations, no financial transactions, no nude pictures. So let me now go to the right of FileVault, and this is Firewall. On Firewall, you must turn this on. Firewall was put in there to block incoming connections unless they were required for basic internet services, including the DHCP, which your Mac uses all the time. So this just stops people trying to hack into your computer from outside. It's very effective, and you do need to turn it on. So if it's not turned on your computer, this is one thing you can do right now to make you safer. And then finally on privacy, I'm not going to spend much time with this, but the privacy button allows you to control which applications have access to what part of the operating system. So at the moment here, I've highlighted the location services. This is one that you will use for some applications, and you can see that on this list of possible applications that use it, two of them are the weather applications that I use. The weather forecast is much more accurate if it knows where you are. And also the speed test. It needs to know where you are in order to figure out if you've got a good speed or not. But you see over on the left-hand side here, there are other capabilities that various applications will go for. The second one down is contacts. People who do mail merge with, you know, like Pages might want to set Pages to where it has access to the contacts. But if you do mail merge, I don't like you very much. I hate when people send me mail merge, because usually it's advertising me something that I don't want at a price that I can't afford. Same with calendars. Who really needs to have access to your calendars, to your reminders, to your photos? On the photos, there might be several applications that should have access to photos, especially the ones that do editing of pictures. For those of you who do advanced graphics work, you may want to turn on several things in here. Which applications should have access to your camera? I don't really like to have my camera on unless I know it's on. If I clicked on it right now, you'd probably find that Zoom is using it, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see me. And the same with microphone. And then there's speech recognition, accessibility, and so on and so forth. So now let's take a look at Safari. When you're surfing, I assume most of you use Safari, but this is what I'm saying is probably true of all the other browsers too. But surfing is where you're most likely to get into trouble. So there are a couple of things that you can do to help protect yourself from it. First is just use Safari, because Apple have gone to some effort to put things in it which stop cross-referencing and so forth. But also in the preferences, you see here, we've got general and tabs and autofill, but up at the top there, you see to the right of center is security. Click on security and then come down and make sure these two guys are checked the way you want them. The top one, turn it on all the time so that it will use a safe browsing to identify websites which are known to be fraudulent. Use that capability. And then below that, I talked earlier about JavaScript. This is where you can turn it on and turn it off. So it's right there in the browser. So if you're in the browser and you're looking at the magic site and you finally get to the page where you need this, the JavaScript, you come here and enable it, do your thing, and then disable it afterwards if you're worried about JavaScript. For my own part, I'm quite careful about staying away from bad websites or setting up my computer to go look at bad websites, but protect myself all the way in. There's sometimes when I want to know what the evil guys are up to and try to test them in part so that we can put appropriate articles into our newsletter and let you know about threats that are out there. Now, in the same place right next to security, there's an icon called privacy up there at the top. And again, here's a couple of things that you can do. One of them is to hit the website tracking and say prevent cross-site tracking. There are a number of websites out there, especially ones which are run by people like Google, who cross-reference each other so that this one over here will know that that one over here has got reference to what you do or what you bought. So if Apple, if Safari in this case, finds anything that does do cross-checking, it will turn it off and disallow it from happening on your computer. Second one down is block all cookies. There are some sites that require you to have cookies on, in which case you'll need to turn that on for those sites. I leave it off because I've got another strategy which gets rid of cookies every day, and I'll show it to you in a moment. And then down at the bottom here, we've got, do you want your computer to look and see whether this particular website will allow you to use your Apple Pay or your Apple Card to go buying stuff? This is up to you guys. I'm nervous about buying too much stuff on the website. I only buy from certain websites, and I have not gotten involved in either Apple Pay or Apple Card, except to do a little research on. So I have it turned off, but only turn it on if you really want it. Don't just leave it on for its own sake. Oh, and here we highlight it. The Animation King is at it again. In here, you can manage your website data, and I'm going to click here and show you how that works. When you click on, you get a window that looks like this, and you get a list of all the websites which are trying to store you or track you or put cookies onto you. And depending on how much surfing you do during a day, you can get to be, tens, even hundreds of these things. You see at the bottom here, excuse me, there's a remove. If you click on one of them and say, I want to remove that one, I don't like that guy. Or the one I'm most likely to use is remove all. You will not hurt yourself if you remove all the cookies on there. You might piss off some of the people who are out there who want to put cookies on your website, but that's their problem. It's not your problem. You feel confident that you can get rid of cookies. They're not really doing anything that you need to have done. It's helping people out there to figure out who you are, what your habits are, and what you like to buy. So, and there's the remove all button highlighted. Now, the other trick that I pull is on Safari. This is a Safari window here. If you go to the Safari menu up in that top left-hand corner, and you come halfway down, there's something called Clear History. When you click on that guy, it offers you to just clear the history for today or clear all history. Now, at the end of each day, I just clear all history. So everything that I did during that day is forgotten by the browser, but it also gets rid of all the cookies. This thing clears not just the history, it clears anything on there that might not be copacetic. And here we go surfing again.
Robert, Wendy is asking, when you remove cookies, does that also clear passwords saved for that site?
No. Passwords are still good if you save the passwords either in the browser, and Safari will allow you to save passwords. So if you go to Amazon, for example, you might tell Safari, remember this password. Also, any passwords that you save into the keychain, they get saved too. In fact, that's part of the operating system. It's got nothing to do with Safari. So you need to periodically scan for malware. I've never, well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't found any malware for a long time. So if you behave yourself and you don't do anything daft on websites, you should be okay. But internally, you've got XProtect and Gatekeeper already working for you, whether you knew it or not. They'll protect you from a fair amount of malware. And XProtect gets often updated. In fact, every time you get one of those things that say you need to update your operating system, often the reason is because they want to update XProtect. It's got in a list of bad guys and bad viruses and bad things that are out there. So use XProtect and keep your operating system up to date. And the same is true with Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper gets updated from time to time. So just keep your operating system up to date. Then these two guys are working for you, whether you like it or not, and keeping you out of trouble without any effort on your part. Then there's some software products which you can get. In theory, you shouldn't need them, but there is something called Malwarebytes. I know some of you have heard of it and maybe use it. There are two versions of it. One is free. The other one is a bit more comprehensive, but it also costs you. In fact, I think you don't just buy the software, you have to rent it. You pay a monthly or an annual fee to use it, and it keeps you up to date, especially with the guys who are trying to put advertising software onto your computer. Malwarebytes was originally designed to do just that. What we call adware is things that sneak onto your computer and make your browser go to certain sites where people are trying to sell stuff. So if you find your browser going to places that you didn't expect it to go to, it could be that somebody's loaded one of these adware things onto your computer, and Malwarebytes is one way of getting rid of it. Also things like Bitdefender. Bitdefender is quite good at also searching through the places where these things get hidden and can remove them out so the adware doesn't do anything. And this is really a geeky one. Maybe Ron uses this. I've used it once and twice. But Knock Knock is an application which is able to go and find persistent apps which are hidden deep down in your system someplace and keep putting these wretched adware things back onto your system. Knock Knock is able to go find them. For most of us, don't worry about this, don't use it. But if you're having problems, it's probably better to get a hold of Ron or myself or someone who knows how to do this, just to run Knock Knock and make sure that we knock all this stuff off your computer and get you back to where you're supposed to be. I just want to let you know that that's available. Now, sharing can be another problem. Sharing your data and sharing your peripherals is possible using Macintosh software. Again, we've gone to System Preferences and clicked on it's down on the bottom row, but there's a little thing called Sharing. If you click on that, you'll get something that looks like this, and it allows you to share data with other computers, with other people. On the left-hand side, you'll see that screen sharing is one of the options. And in fact, at the moment, I've got screen sharing on, so I can share my screen with Zoom, which is how you're able to see all this good stuff. It's useful to use file sharing, which is the second thing. You can see here that when I click on file sharing, on the right-hand side, I get the folders, and I can add and subtract folders here. You see the plus sign at the bottom. I can add a particular folder and say, make this one be shareable. Then to the right of that, it's which users you want to be able to share them with. So in my case, I've said that Robert Elphick can read and write, but everyone else can read only, but they can't write. I don't want them writing onto my computer. But this is useful if, for example, I want to share some files with my wife or somebody close by who happen to be on the same network. I can do that, and we can just ship files to each other without running them back and forth with thumb drives. Her office is 20 feet away, and I don't want to run that far. I'm kidding. And below that, you see media sharing. That's things like sharing your pictures from one place to another. You can also do that with photos. Below that is printer sharing. It's useful to be able to use printers that are in other people's offices in the same building. So I can set up, like a color printer in my office, and then maybe you put a laser printer in my wife's office, and we can share each other's printers using this. Do you want people to be able to remotely log into your computer? Usually that'll be turned off. And then there's remote management, remote Apple events, stuff that's probably only going to be for geeks. And most of us don't need to worry about that. But this is where you check to see what you're sharing and with whom you're sharing it. And by default, you should probably have all this stuff turned off on the left-hand side, the way you see it here, and only turn it on when you know that you need to use it or want to use it. But it can keep you safer. And thus it is nightfall. So I'm going to say goodnight, magic people. End the process right there. And I'm in screen sharing, so I guess I'll turn it off.